Yes, so I'm delighted to be joined by Charlie Kam, who is the presidential candidate for the US Transhumanist Party. To say, first of all, Charlie, thank you very much for your time. The first thing I wanted to clear up very quickly is actually how it works kind of from a technical perspective. So do you people have to, if someone wants to vote for you, can they do it in every state, or is it just in certain states? And do we have to write in your name, or is your name actually
no,
ballot
the,
paper?
okay. By the way, thank you for having me. No, it's every state. What it is it's members of the Transhumanist Party. They vote. And so you can vote on,
Yeah.
and it's a certain kind of preferential voting. So if there's, for example, if there's 5 candidates, you would pick out who you like to see president as number 1, who would you think is second best, and so on, with the bottom maybe being none of the above. So, and then everybody votes that way, and then the bottom person is eliminated. Then they do another vote, and the next bottom person is eliminated. So there's 4, then there's 3. The next vote, there's, they do the same thing until eventually it eliminates, and it's the final person. It's actually a really great way of voting. That way, you're not, it almost requires people to get a majority of the votes, or at least it picks the candidate that the most people like, or at least has the biggest majority.
Yeah. I mean, I was wondering, what's the kind of the rationale behind the Transhumanist Party standing a candidate? I mean, is it to kind of gain awareness about transhumanism and kind of, gain media attention and kind of, public knowledge about your movement?
Yes, yes.
Or is it to try and take votes off the main parties so they adopt your policies? Sorry, yes, you're answering, brilliant.
No. I mean, realistically, it's mostly just about pushing the agenda of what we believe in, to establish a platform. And, maybe in the future, if we ever get out of this crazy duopoly that we're in, there might be a chance for the Transhumanist Party to actually have a stronger platform. But, we'll see. I think in the future I think it will change. I think there's going to be so many drastic changes in the next 10, 20 years that the almost impossible question of thinking that we're going to get rid of a duopoly might actually happen. But it looks almost impossible now. But that's kind of how everything in the future looks right now, if you think linearly. So
I mean, what will your main policies be? I don't know if you've worked out your manifesto yet, but what's kind of like your main platform?
Well, for me, the main thing is really is life extension. I mean, that's to me, that's the key to the whole movement. It's about being able to extend healthy lives for people and make it as ubiquitous as possible so that it's available for everyone. I don't want this to be one of those rich man only club. I think that's a terrible thing. What my goal is to promote the idea that everybody can live longer, healthier lives inexpensively. And that really is the main difference between, I think, the Transhumanist Party and the other parties, because there are other issues that you can see overlap that were, not so mainstream before, but now they are, like, universal basic income. That's become popular talk amongst the other parties. But the idea of life extension is something that's still you don't hear about it much. And yet, to me, that is by far the most important, really the most important topic, because life is the most important thing. I mean, if you die, no other topic matters much, does it, if you're not around? So to me, that just seems like, and by the way, I understand why it's not the most important topic, because, our culture tends to follow tradition. And the tradition has been that we've always debated all the other issues. And the reason is because really the question or the idea of being able to live beyond our own genetic genetic disposition of only up to, let's say, 120 years max. To be able to go beyond that has never been available. We didn't have the technology, and we really didn't have any kind of means to be able to do that until, technically speaking, probably 1967 or something. And I specifically that year, because that's the first year that that there was a chronically preserved person, which was James Bedford. But we didn't have any kind of ways to preserve life. So the idea or the issue of trying to get things, to make that an issue of public policy for the masses, I suppose, was considered just impossible or futile. But we don't have that anymore. And now it's a viable thing, and I think it needs to be at the forefront.
I mean, in terms of kind of like short-term policy objectives, I've heard a lot within the transhumanist movement about getting aging officially declared to be a disease, so something to be overcome. I mean, is that one of the things you'll be focusing on? I mean, I presume kind of boosting funding for research into radical life extension kind of thing as well.
Yes. I would love to see aging listed as a disease. I think the reason for doing that, and some people have their reasons why or why not to do that, but the reason you want to do it, the obvious reason, is because aging really is at the base of every age-related disease. So if aging itself can be declared a disease, then it's going to be a lot easier to get the NIH or the National Institute of Health to secure funding for it. So if a scientist says they're working on age-related diseases, for example, Aubrey de Grey and the SENS Foundation, if they're working on aging, we might be able to get funding for that, as opposed to where we have to just try to get funding for something specific like cancer, which is a noble idea, and we want to do that. But I think we want to really focus on aging. Yeah.
Interesting that you just mentioned universal basic income. A couple of hours ago for a separate interview up on the channel now. One thing we were discussing is that transhumanism almost need a kind of an Andrew Yang moment. A moment that takes it from being an idea which is still, kind of confined to academic and scientific circles. So it's really a fringe movement, but which can catapult it into being a household name, in the same way Andrew Yang did with universal basic income. Do you think there's something transhumanism needs? Could it be like one technology or even one individual who could just take the movement that one step further so it becomes something that the general public are commonly aware of?
Yeah, I mean, as far as a universal basic income goes and getting that idea out there, I think what's interesting is that number one, it's going to happen. I mean, it's inevitable. Because of automation, jobs are going to disappear. And it's not really a new idea. One of the greatest economists of all time, John Maynard Keynes, who, created the Keynesian economics philosophy, he predicted this in 1930. He called it technological unemployment or something like that. The point being that he saw that, eventually this was going to occur, and that there would be, because of technology, there would not be enough jobs to go around. So it's inevitable that we'll have universal basic income. And I think this COVID-19 situation really put that at the forefront, because, a lot of people lost their jobs. And that was pretty scary. And that also tied into another issue, which was universal basic health for the United States, because when they lost their jobs, they lost the health care that was provided by their jobs, which was kind of why, when Andrew Yang, who was running, people thought of him a little bit fringy because he was offering universal basic income. He was kind of ahead of his time by only maybe 6 months because he didn't foresee COVID coming. And a lot of people are excited about, maybe that's something we need to revisit real fast.
Yeah. I mean, what do you think COVID means for the transhumanist movement? I mean, will it kind of increase public science and, increase science funding? Or, I mean, obviously in the short term, I guess it probably has a negative effect, but it kind of disrupts the work that's going on and disrupts lots of experiments that are happening.
Well, what COVID is doing, interestingly, I mean, it is a negative thing overall, obviously, but what it's doing in a sense is actually kind of pointing society in the direction of science, which is what the Transhumanist Party is all about. And, because think about it, what happened, at least, in our country, in the United States, okay, we had a leader that at first, when this was happening, when the COVID thing started happening in China, he was basically ignoring it, and he had the information about it and he was ignoring it, saying that, and he would make statements like, well, it's just going to magically go away. He literally used terms like that, magically go away. And then later on, he would try to say, well, a few people have it. And then eventually he was making suggestions about injecting cleaning bleach or something ridiculous. Now, having a leader that's incompetent is you can argue about it, you can almost laugh at it, you can feel bad about it. But when people die because of it, it becomes a lot more real. And and then you saw what was happening on the conferences that he would have to the public. Everybody started looking at Fauci for the answers, the scientists, because you can't have a leader up there saying we're gonna drink bleach or inject ourselves. I mean, that's just ridiculous. So it tells you that what we need are scientific answers to the problems at hand. So what I think COVID's doing is it's exposing that in a big way, saying, hey, look, we can't rely on crazy leaders or inept leaders. I mean, let's even look at something beyond just him. Let's look at what happened with Congress when they tried to interview Mark Zuckerberg about, what was going on with social media and whether or not there was a dissemination of misinformation. And yet Congress, all these leaders in Congress didn't even know how to ask him questions because they didn't understand the technology. That's a pretty bad situation to have in the 21st century when you have leaders that are not smart. So, I think this exposes the fact that we need better education, not just for the leaders, but for the electorate at whole, because really, you can only blame Trump so much because you have to say, well, how did he get into office to begin with? Yeah. Well, if half of the country thinks like, well, he seemed funny because he made fun of other people on stage. He made clever remarks, where it's a personality contest. That's not good. We need to have really more engaged and more intelligent, voters, so they know what's going on and they know what's at stake. Because look, like I said, what happened here, you have 100,000 people died. It could have been a lot less if we started addressing this issue, if it was taken seriously, as if, if we would have had a leader that was a science-based leader, someone who really understood that how important we have to address issues like this with regard to, science.
Yeah. And when you talk to kind of members of the public about transhumanism, so a bit passive, where you're asking for their vote, what are the most common objections? I'm guessing that religion probably comes up a lot. It's possibly the main obstacle. But I'm wondering if that's, the only real objective, or if there's also kind of secular objections as well.
Well, I think in the beginning, that was a bigger issue than it is now. Even 4 years ago, I think, when Zoltan was running, I think it was a bigger issue. But since that time, there's been more people joining they do have religious backgrounds, and there's a very vibrant transhumanist Mormon group, and there's also a transhumanist Christian group, and they even had a conference last year. So I've met people that I know personally, they're friends, that are saying, well, how do I fit in if I'm Christian? I said, look, the goal is for the Transhumanist Party is so that we can live longer. And all you got to do is say, wouldn't you like to see your grandparents not die? Isn't that really what you would want? And they said, yes. I said, well, that's what we're about. We're stressing the importance of advancing technology, especially medical technology, so that we can keep people alive longer, but most importantly, longer and healthier. And when they hear that, they say, yeah, that makes sense. Because look, if it was such that science was a problem for religious people, then why would they be okay with defibrillators, right? If somebody has a heart attack and you're saying, hey, look, your friend there just had a heart attack, I got a defibrillator here, or you can let him go to heaven. What do you want me to do? I guarantee probably 9 times out of 10, if not 10 times, they're like, try the defibrillator. Let's try that.
Yeah.
So, it goes along those lines. And I think that's why I've not had a problem really, because I never want to turn away anybody based on their religion or their politics. This isn't really to me, this isn't a right-wing issue or a left-wing issue. This is more of a future-wing issue. This is about, let's look at the future because it's right here upon us now. We have the medical technology, and if we put more resources towards what we have, we can save so many lives. I mean, look, right now, statistically, 150,000 people die every day on this planet. 100,000 of those people are dying from age-related diseases. So imagine if we could really put all or a lot of our resources towards the idea of improving our medical technologies so that we can save lives. Well, my goodness, all these suffering and all that, we are putting life and compassion and empathy at the forefront of society. And by the way, in reminder or referencing back to, I mentioned Keynesian economics. When he made his prediction, he said in 1930, he said about 100 years from now, we will see that the importance or the priority of humanity won't be an economic one because we will have essentially abundance, which is now what is being all written about by people like Peter Diamandis, who's another amazing transhumanist futurist, and it was talked about by Drexler in his book, Engines of Creation. The idea of where we're going to have an abundance economy. And when Keynes predicted that, he also predicted that, because we would have a society where it isn't all about profits, that we would slowly move away from greed, that we would have a higher moral compass in our society. And that's one of the important aspects of transhumanism as well. We want to see people become smarter and become more compassionate, more empathetic, more loving and understanding of the people around us. I mean, this is how we're going to be able to deal with current issues that are happening, like racism, which is an inherently terrible, terrible thing. And systemic racism is live and kicking in this country, and it's terrible. And we need to eliminate that. But we need to do it by educating people. And education can be, we need to improve our education system. That's something we can do as well. All these issues, they're all intermingled. Yeah. And, so I don't mean to keep rambling on, but I love this stuff. So, I won't shut up if you don't interrupt. So I apologize.
No, it's fascinating. I mean, it's very interesting that you bring up racism in particular. And obviously, one of the factors, I guess, that is as a species, we evolved in a very different situation to one we currently live in. So we evolved in kind of small hunter-gatherer societies where extreme tribalism, suspicion of outsiders, and a propensity to violence were probably quite useful. They're probably Darwinianly beneficial to us. I mean, do you think it's the case we've essentially outgrown our biology? But we've still got hang-ups from our kind of evolutionary past, such as our extreme tribalism, which are now very damaging for us as a species, and that we need transhumanism to kind of knock off the rough edges of humanity.
Well, yeah, are you asking me if we need to get out of that, or are we getting out of it?
Yeah, no. So, I mean, do we need to? Is that one of the reasons that we need transhumanism?
Well, sure. Yeah, no, we do. Whether it's transhumanism or some other mechanism or other train of thought, we do need to eliminate this nonsensical idea that there's a difference between people because of skin, because of the melanin produced within our skin, or any kind of distinctions that are based on, essentially made up things. I mean, these are not scientifically validated differences. You can't, the idea that someone comes from a particular plot of land, by boundaries that were man-made, and that makes them this or that is foolish. Or to say because of a person's skin color. I mean, this isn't the age of we're in an information technology age, and it's about how smart and how we could better ourselves through our intelligence. And the idea that there should be racial divisions is almost embarrassing. I mean, we should be way beyond that by now. It's really sad to see that. What I'm happy about is to see that younger generations have embraced the idea of interracial everything, and I love that. So I think a lot of this, racism, what's happening, and you see it really being exposed in a heavy way, is kind of still there because of old minds and old ways of thinking. And I'd love to see that get rooted out. I think social media is a great way to keep this thing exposed and that we can flush it out. And some people are complaining that, are they going overboard? Is there too much PC or whatever? No, there isn't. No, I think they should just expose the heck out of this as much as possible. There's something going on in the United States where, where they're pointing out different marketing campaigns that have been around for a long time, like what is it? I think Pepsi, the PepsiCo company, owns a pancake mix called Aunt Jemima, and on the picture of it is an elderly black woman. Now, for maybe a white person, they might not realize that there's some kind of problem with that. I grew up seeing that. I didn't think that was an issue. But if that's offensive, and I've read now where it is to some black people that they feel offended, get rid of it. It shouldn't be there. If people are getting offended by stuff, it should be removed. And people say, well, isn't that extreme? Can't you find offense to everything? Well, let's look at everything then. Why should things be out there in the public that are so offensive? So I'm not afraid to that. And I think it's wrong to minimize someone who says, hey, that's offensive. And just because it's not offensive to you, you shouldn't say, well, come on, why is that offensive? No. We should address all these things. But, I'm sorry, go ahead. It sounds like you're
sorry. It kind of seems to me that, so this is linking on to that transhumanism is almost somewhat ahead of the curve. So, the issues you're talking about, kind of human body modification, integrating human artificial intelligence, they could become huge issues for the human species in kind of 10, 20 years' time, as technological developments come along. Is that how transhumanists kind of see themselves, as very much a vanguard movement, but in 15 years' time, say, that Democrats and Republicans, mainstream politicians, will be talking about exactly the same issues you're talking about now?
Yes, I think that is exactly right. I think that's what happened with Bernie Sanders in a sense. He was talking about universal basic income and Medicare for all back in he's done it his whole life, really. And when he brought it up in 2016, when he was running against Hillary, a lot of people said, well, that's just too extreme, and we're afraid of that. And they were so afraid that they really just tried to, they were afraid to run him against Trump in fear that his policies were too extreme. They went moderate with Hillary, and well, that didn't work out so well. So now, though, you see in the last Democratic primary, that was the whole issue, was like, what about Medicare for all? How are we going to make sure everybody's covered? So the idea of Medicare for all became kind of what you had to embrace in one way or another, and they said, well, Medicare for all, if you choose it. It literally became the new issue. And then it was only 4 years' time, really. So, yeah. And I think progressive issues or ideas that are going to help humanity are going to speed up. So what might have taken, the idea of, for example, in our country, I remember when Obama was first running in 2008, there was a question about gay marriage. And his answer, because he had to be politically, expedient and wanted to win, he says, well, I believe it's for a man and a woman, that it's between a man and a woman. Well, that changed pretty fast. But it took, by the time he was running 4 years later, and then finally when Hillary, who also had that policy, by the way, that same stance back in 2008, when she was running, she says, oh, no, it's open for everybody. And interestingly, Biden was the one who kind of accidentally opened up that when he was still Obama's vice president. But now, when people talk about the idea of a man and a man getting married, or a woman and a woman, or, that's just normal. And that stuff, it took years to get around to that. But once it took hold, it was the kind of thing where, like, well, wait a minute, you mean that's not legal? Like, it's preposterous that people would argue over something so innocuous as, like, well, he likes that person. In fact, they just had a ruling in the Supreme Court about employers not being allowed to hire someone based on their gender preference. Like, if someone was gay, if a man liked another man, The Supreme Court, by the way, the ruling, you had two of the conservative members join with the liberal members of the Supreme Court. So it was a 6-3 ruling saying that no, an employer can't discriminate. And think about it. What they said was, well, wait a minute. Why would you say a man has to be fired because he likes another man? Wouldn't you say then you should fire a woman because she likes a man? I mean, it showed the stupidity of the idea of even doing that. So I think, these issues, like you're saying, are these transhumanist ideas going to become mainstream? Yes. And by the way, I think they're going to become mainstream a lot sooner because we are an exponentially growing society. Social media is a powerful, powerful tool. We saw what happened with the Me Too movement not long ago, and we see what's happening with Black Lives Matter. I love this stuff. I love to see the power of intelligent people, liberal-minded people that really want equality and deserve equality, fighting for it and using it as a way to advance really important causes of equality for all of humanity.
But I can probably guess your answer to this one based on the fact that you're running for the party. I've heard there's been some kind of division within the transhumanist community about whether transhumanists should have their own political parties. So, I mean, should there be a transhumanist party, or should American transhumanists join the Republicans or the Democrats, and British transhumanists join Labour or the Tories, and so on? What do you think the argument is for having kind of independent, distinct transhumanist parties? I mean, it may come back to what you were saying earlier about kind of raising status and raising awareness.
Yeah, it really is just about raising awareness at this point. It's just like there's, a Green Party out there. I mean, obviously, climate change has become a really, really important issue, and I agree with that, climate change, and I agree with we need to really up the ante on green technology and renewable energies. We need that stuff, but if it wasn't for parties like the Green Party, maybe that wouldn't, it wouldn't have that base to push it. So I think the Transhumanist Party is good to exist. I do think there is a duopoly in the parties, but I also think that's why, if you look at it's interesting, we have the duopoly of the Republicans and the Democrats, and it's sad that those are the only, and by the way, they really have skewed it so that it's really hard to try to break into that. I mean, for the Transhumanist Party, or even for the Libertarian Party, the Green Party, or the Independent Party, the Reform Party, any of those third parties in the United States, it is so hard to get on the ballot. You have to spend millions of dollars. You have to get hundreds of thousands of signatures. They make it really, really, really hard to do that. And those are laws that were made by the duopoly. So you see what's happened, though. The United States is getting fed up with some of the stance of the Republican and Democratic Party, so much so that the number one vote getter of the Republican Party was a guy who was not a Republican. Trump wasn't even in the Republican Party prior to him running in 2016. He was a reality show host who had donated a lot of money to the Democrats and other parties. He really doesn't have a real ideology anyway. I mean, that's not really what he's into. And the same could be said for the Democrats. I mean, the most inspirational person they had running was really Bernie Sanders, and he wasn't really he declared himself as a socialist or democratic socialist. So he jumped from being independent, signing up with the Democratic Party so that he could run, and there he was, garnering most all of the attention, and everybody's adopting his views. So I like the idea of us, having the Transhumanist Party. I understand that it would be basically impossible to win now, but there might be a situation when you think about people like Trump upending the Republican Party and Bernie Sanders basically doing the same for the Democratic Party, that maybe those two parties are going to start to splinter, and you're going to see more chances for more parties. I think that will happen eventually, because there's just going to be a sophisticated way of voting, where we'll have online voting that maybe can be checked by some sort of blockchain. We'll have to do something a lot more sophisticated, because look, with COVID, we can't even send people necessarily to the polls in fear of their lives now because of spreading a disease. So there's going to have to be a big overhaul of all this stuff. And I would like to see this Transhumanist Party stick around to see how it all plays out.
I mean, very interesting. You mentioned earlier that you've been involved with the Transhumanist Party, or rather the Transhumanist Movement for a long time. I mean, how do you think the movement's changed over sort of the past 10 years or so?
Well, like part of our conversation, I think what's happened is a lot of the ideas have become a lot more mainstream, a lot more acceptable by the public. They may not even know it's transhumanism, or they call it something else, which is fine. I mean, I don't care. It's not like we have to have the word. And in fact, I mean, like, for example, right now, or in the recent, now, you have someone like Elon Musk. Now, by most definition, Elon Musk is a transhumanist. I don't know that he thinks of him, I don't think he calls himself that. I've never heard him actually say that. But the fact that he's actually started a company called Neuralink, and he's trying to put neural lace into brains for as a human brain interface with the internet or technology. Wow, I mean, that's totally transhumanist as far as the philosophy goes. So, the ideas of transhumanism. So as far as what's changed, if you're asking me how has it changed, well, I just see all of our ideas are basically being embraced. I just think the problem that we have is that the term itself, it's just not widely known necessarily, or it's misunderstood. For a long time, when you said transhumanism, people didn't know what that meant, or they immediately confused it with something like transgender. And the funny thing is, transgender has now picked up it's made its definition a lot clearer, because you've seen people like Bruce Jenner who had his transgender operation, or he's become transgender. So people know what that means now. So by default, they know transhumanism is not that. Like, it's not like we did anything to change, to get people to understand the definition of it better, but it is getting more defined. And the other thing I would say is that there are a lot more transhumanist organizations popping up around the world. I know that they are, in your country, in the UK, they're in Australia, they're all around the world, really.
Now, as you say, obviously this is incredibly unlikely, but just say for the sake of argument that you win the election, and that there's that America has a transhumanist government. What would a Charlie Kam presidency look like? What would a transhumanist government look like?
Well, I would call upon really intelligent advisors. I'll tell you that. I would want to see people like Ray Kurzweil at the helm of some cabinet post, if he's willing to do so, as well as people like Aubrey de Grey and people that are in the transhumanist movement, or at least abide by the thinking of transhumanism, where the idea of life extension really is at the forefront. There's no reason that people should be dying in such numbers. I mean, our country is outraged because we're losing people to COVID, and we lost 100,000 people over the last few months. And that's a sad, sad situation. But like I said, in the world, we have 100,000 people dying of age-related diseases every day. And if that was called, blah, blah disease, the world would be freaking out right now. Like, oh my God, we can't, but we don't. We sadly think of aging as like natural. But we, like I said, are in an area, we're in a part of humanity that, actually of all of life form, that never existed up until this moment. In the billions of years that existence has been around, it's only now that we actually have an opportunity to extend our lives through medical means. And if we can really push it, we can start saving lots of lives. So that would be at the forefront of my platform. And I would look at a way to reconfigure our budget, because there's the money for our budget is being displaced in ways that should be prioritized to save lives as much as possible. That would be something. And like I said earlier, save as many lives as possible, and it can't be about whether you got money or not. It has to be for everybody, no matter how poor you might be. That would be at the forefront of it.
I mean, just one final question. So one thing I say, I've interviewed a lot of transhumanists, and one thing I find is that they often have very different priorities, as in kind of in terms of the specific thing that really excites them. Some people are really excited about mind uploading. Some people are really excited about whole body prosthetics, the whole kind of plethora of different things that people get very interested in. I was wondering, what is it about the transhumanist future that kind of interests you most, excites you most?
Oh, well, it is pretty much what I've been saying all along. It's to not die. I mean, really, I grew up, I'm basically non-religious. And when I was, even when I was in single digits, I mean, I was already starting. I remember reading some book that I saw by Dr. Wayne Dyer. It was called Your Erroneous Zones. And then I found out that his writings were based on Abraham Maslow. And when I got a book about Maslow and I saw the hierarchy of needs, and then I started reading other philosophers, but I eventually was very non-religious, and existential ideas were popping in my head all the time. And my friends who were religious, they knew where they were going when they died. But for me, became a frightening concept. Like, wait, I'm going to die and there'll be no existence of poor Charlie Kam anymore. I didn't like that idea at all. So I really started to focus on the idea of, well, why is that the case? And the more I found out about different ideas, the more I realized that, wait, that doesn't necessarily have to be. And then I found out that there were other organs. There was such a thing as the World Transhumanist Association in the early or the late in the 90s. And I started following that. But to me, I think I really look forward to the idea of not dying, to having a really healthy lifestyle, to eventually merging with technologies, because our bodies are rather fragile. I mean, they're amazingly durable to a point, but we are susceptible to disease and radiation, and we break down as we get older. So the idea is there's a few steps here, and the first one is we want to live biologically healthy and longer as much as we can. So that's my immediate goal, is to try to live in, as long as possible, healthily in this body, but with the idea that I'm going to merge with technology, not just to have, a cyborg and then robotic body, but also my mind. I want to be able to have my, my brain be able to access all the information that I do right now with a cell phone. Like, our smartphones are incredible, right? I mean, I remember growing up, you didn't have that. If you wanted to remember what was the name of that actor in that movie, well, you'd have to go home and ask somebody or whatever. Now you just a couple taps on your phone and you got it. And what's happening there? It's kind of like your mind is already attached to the internet, because your brain is, it says, what was the name of that? And your brain and your subconscious is automatically signaling like, hey, go. And it travels down your arm because go use your hand to tap that thing that your hand is holding right now, your phone, and it'll type in the name, and you'll know it's like, all that's triggering in your subconscious, and it works. So imagine that we have access to the internet, but it's immediately glommed onto our neurons in our brain, maybe by way of nanobots. This is something that Kurzweil talks about. So it's not just some far-fetched thing, it's something that's coming. So I'm looking forward to not only living indefinitely or living longer lives and healthy ones, but I want to merge with technology. I want to be able to do like the movie Limitless. Remember that movie with?
I haven't actually seen it, I'll be honest.
Oh, okay, go watch it. Now that movie, of course, was a movie, but what it showed was if a man was able to, or anybody, I don't mean man, but I mean human, was able to access all the information that's out there, and he had, what kind of guy could that be? Well, it showed in that movie how he could just excel at everything. He could speak every language. He could communicate with everybody. So what I'm looking forward to is a time where we all have that ability, where we're all super smart, where we can think thousands of times faster, because that is going to come eventually. And when we do, we're gonna. I hate to even get into these kind of discussions because it almost sounds kind of crazy, but we are going to get to a point where we will have that connection to technology immediately accessible in our brain, and it will be able to transmit rather than chemically from one neuron to another. We'll be able to transmit it technologically, so it'll be flying much faster. So just like a calculator can do numbers so fast, whereas we need to think about those numbers so hard and long, Well, the reality is we will be able to think just instantaneously like that. We'll even have analysis bots that can think and calculate faster, so we'll be able to communicate. And then we'll have a strange situation where our vocal cords and our ability to communicate verbally will be a bottleneck. It'll be hard because we'll want to tell you. I'll want to tell you information faster than I can even say it. So we'll start to be able to transmit the way our phones transmit. We'll be able to send communication fast. And what's interesting is that this is not stuff that's going to come 100 years. We have to remember that information technology is on an exponential trajectory. This is probably the most important thing people need to start to really understand. Exponential trajectory is what we're on right now when it comes to information technology, not linear. A lot of people are still thinking linearly. We must get past that. We have to start to say, wait, you're right. This stuff's coming, at a multiplicative rate. So it's what took maybe 1,000 years to get to scientifically, we're going to see advances of that nature. When you think about it, 1,000 years ago, we didn't have anything like television. Well, imagine we're going to have amazing advances that aren't going to take 1,000 years. They're going to take 10 years. And in 10 years' time, it's only going to take 1 year to go 1,000 years of advanced timing. And that's going to keep growing exponentially. So you're going to have all sorts of amazing things happening just within the next 20 years, 25 years. And this isn't something that is some crazy fringy idea. These are things that are being written by a lot of different authors now. And I mentioned Ray Kurzweil as one of them. Well, who is Ray Kurzweil? Think about this. Google him if anybody doesn't know who he is. But he was selected by Google for their engineering department. I mean, Bill Gates called him the Thomas Edison of our time. People know that he's brilliant. And you know what? He's made predictions based on nothing magical. He predicted it based on watching how computational powers are growing exponentially. It's the same kind of similar to what Moore's law is. And when you have brilliant minds like that saying, well, this is where we're going, and you can see he's been pretty accurate since the 90s and even before then you have to say, oh yeah, this is where we're going, and we're going there fast. So I think people need to really pay attention to stuff. We didn't touch upon cryonics, but that's a whole nother thing that people need to pay attention to, because that's an alternative that's out there that's being totally neglected. It's a shame because some brilliant people are dying that could have easily been cryopreserved. And that's going to come around. You're going to see where that's going to be like, oh my God, why didn't we freeze people? Or the word freeze now is not being used. It's called vitrifying, because it's a certain way of preserving people where there's no damage by way of expansion of ice crystals formation. But anyway, I apologize for rambling on there. But again, I love this stuff, so I get caught up in it. So the passion of my life, I suppose.
No, actually, one very last question, just because I've just thought about it.
Yeah, keep going. I love them.
So the transhumanist, it's about cryonics specifically. So the Transhumanist Party UK has a policy that, not immediately, but when it becomes financially unviable, cryonics should be available on the NHS. So that's our national health system. So basically, anyone in Britain would have the option to be cryogenically frozen. Is that the kind of direction you'd like to see American public health going?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, actually, it's funny to me. That's one of the easiest things that we can do, because if you can scale it, it should be really inexpensive. Because think about it in theory. What are we talking about? Cooling someone down and preserving them in liquid nitrogen, which is cheap. I mean, that should be done really inexpensively, and it should be an option for everybody. And the reason it should be is just very simple. Right now, technically, there's 3 options when you are pronounced dead in this planet, and then one of them is to be buried. No, that you're not coming back there. The other one is to be cremated. You're not coming back in ashes. But cryonics gives you an option, and why? Like, that should be the normal option for everybody. The only reason it really isn't even because it's like a weird thing anymore. That's because it's no more weird than saying we're going to take a person's body and throw it and burn it into ashes, or put a person underground so worms can eat them. That sounds pretty gross to me. It sounds a lot more disgusting than freezing. The only reason that it's not more being done more is because of the cost. It's because it's not cost effective. And really, that's the only real reason most people think it's cost prohibitive. I mean, realistically, it's not. I mean, all you got to do is buy an insurance policy, but people still think that it's cheaper for cremation. So my answer to your question, and I apologize for my long-winded answer, but I like to give some background to why I think the way I do. I do think that cryonics. I love that. I love what you just told me about the fact that the UK is going to do that. I think that is going to I think the United States will eventually do that, especially under a Charlie Kam presidency. It would, but I do think that's going to be something. I think it's just going to be a natural. It'll happen.
I mean, that was what the Transhumanist Party UK wants, not what the actual UK government wants. I think.
But I mean, then we're agreeing. Yeah, I'm sorry. I thought you guys were. That was something, but it is something that we have. Yeah, no, for the Transhumanist Party, yeah, that's what I would want. I mean, I would look to put that out there right away.
Well, Charlie, it's been a real pleasure. I'd say thank you so much for your time.